2016, I was sitting in an outdoor meeting area in Hampangan, a rural community in the Philippines. I was listening to a focus group discussion led by their water committee. This is the group elected by their neighbors to manage their newly completed water system. You can think of it like your own utility. You pay your water bill, you expect clean water in your tap. The difference is this is a much smaller scale. Hampangan has just 192 homes. The system is owned by the community. So you can think of it like a micro-utility. I was there to learn directly from community members. There was a woman who was animated as she shared her story about collecting water from a nearby stream before having clean water in her own tap. She rested her hands on her pregnant stomach as she explained and emphasized the benefits that clean water have for the life she carried. I, subconsciously, rested my hands on my own pregnant stomach, mimicking her. After the focus group, we sat together, encouraged to eat as much as we could, a lot of lumpia and fresh coconut water, and we shared a really special moment of anticipated motherhood. About a year later, I was on another trip visiting energy and water micro-utilities. As we got closer to Hampangan, I started to panic. Statistics about pregnancy complications and early childhood infant mortality flooded my brain. I had since delivered a healthy baby via an emergency C-section, enabled by clean water and renewable, reliable energy. Just 41% of health facilities in low and middle income countries have reliable electricity. Even fewer have clean water. I knew I was so lucky to have my baby where I'm from. As we again began to gather in the center of Hampangan, these statistics flooding my brain, I was scanning the crowd and I was dreading the possibilities. What if her baby was sick? Or worse, if her arms were empty, how would I face her? How is that fair? I was looking for her, and I was waiting, and eventually, she was a little late because her baby was napping. She came and sat next to me with a healthy baby girl, Micah, in her arms. Micah is growing up in a home with clean water. Micah is less likely to catch a waterborne illness, still the leading cause of death of children under 5 globally. So we probably here all agree that everybody should have access to these universal resources, but why don't they? 2 billion people lack access to clean water at home. Just under 1 billion don't have reliable electricity. So let's imagine for a moment that we are the world. This is the population of the world. Take a look at the person to your right. Take a look at the person to your left. Of the 3 of you, 1 of you has never had clean water at home. Imagine the difference in your daily lives. Let that sink in. So part of this is technology. I love to talk about technology, but I'm here to talk about people and shifting the power to people and communities like Hampangan. For our sector to succeed in our ambitious goals, we have to confront the history of colonialism, the widening distribution of wealth globally, and the very limited resources in the communities with the most need. Unfortunately, many of our solutions are based on the same economic and social systems that actually created these inequities in the first place. So how does that work? It doesn't work. In her book, Dead Aid, the Zambian economist Dambisa Moyo explains how international aid destined for Africa, instead of promoting economic growth, condemned the continent to poverty and a continued dependence on foreign aid, perpetuating poverty. A compounding issue I see in my work is that many of these solutions are designed very far from the problems themselves. Part of this is also related to funding. The 2022 Global Humanitarian Assistance Report found that just 3% of international aid goes to local and national groups. 3%. That means the vast majority of that funding goes to international organizations. Many of those are transnational corporations. As we continue to advocate for more resources and investment in our sector, which is needed, we also have to address how these resources make it to the communities who have been left behind. So what do we do? People like me are told, invite people into the room, bring diverse voices to the table, and open the doors to historically underrepresented groups. While very well intended, these recommendations are still based on the same power structures. They assume that I have the power, or at least that I have better access to it. Realistically, individuals like you and me might not be able to shift the entire global economic system. I know it's a bummer. I've had to come to terms with it myself, and I think about it a lot. But we also don't need to just reinforce existing power structures. So what can we do? What if we get out of that conference room? What if we flip the table? What if instead we go to that community meeting spot and make sure those resources actually go with us? This is starting to get to the question of power. Who has the resources? Who has access to the resources? And how do we make sure that they have the intended impact? One way I support this is to run my organization with distributed decision making. The decision about what technology we choose, how funds get spent, are in the hands of local people and organizations. Oftentimes people are shocked when I tell them that I, as the executive director of this global organization, I cannot recall a single time where I was the one that decided yes or no on a project. It's not because I'm indecisive. I truly do not believe that I am the one that should make that decision. So if I'm not sitting at a faraway table making decisions about projects, who does? The communities themselves. They vote to move forward with the projects. They adopt bylaws. They set tariff structures. They elect their management committee. The key ingredient for this to be successful for us is partnership. We seek partners that understand the local social, political context. They speak the language, and they already have relationships with these communities. They work with the communities to understand the problems and start to design solutions. This addresses not just the technology and the infrastructure, but the human part of this work. We support our partners. We bring expertise, technology, resources, and a lot of training to help the communities manage their systems. We don't control it. After the initial investment, the technology, the money, and the power stays in the communities. In our first 25 years, we've helped over 500,000 people in some of the most remote areas of the world have access to these resources. In November 2020, we also saw how this approach to micro-utilities can help communities be very resilient in the face of ever-increasing climate impacts. 2 late-season hurricanes hit Nicaragua hard. Cities were flooded, highways were impassable, roads were destroyed, especially to rural communities. 2 years prior, We had worked with the people of Los Andes and our local partner in Nicaragua to implement a water microutility. While many communities were cut off from external aid and didn't have clean drinking water, the microutility in Los Andes survived. The community continued to maintain it, and they were able to carry on. I don't just believe in this approach because it aligns with my worldview. It does align with my worldview. But we actually have evidence that show that 97% of our microutilities are still functioning 2, 10, up to 20 years later. This is in a sector where a lot of interventions actually fail before 2 years. You don't hear very much of those stories. As we think about increasing access to these important resources, it might seem like having a well-designed system might seem to do the trick. Think about the technology, the resources, it works, right? But what's profound is when the decision-making and the system is put in the hands of the local people. So as we work to increase universal access to these critical resources, I ask you all to flip the table, work in partnership, and shift the power to the communities who are more than ready to build a more equitable world. Thank you.